I could have killed them all. I could have killed you. In town, you're the law. Out here, it's me. Don't push it. Don't push it or I'll give you a war you won't believe. Here's a look at the Sly Stallone shop. Rambo First Blood. John J. Rambo 1/6 scale collectible figure. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Stallone was very much involved in helping design the first 2 action figures that will be released in late 2022. This collection will feature all the best movie characters from Sylvester Stallone, starting with John J. Rambo. The team involved in this project is selected from the best artists and talents in the 1/6 world, and the quality of production will match the highest standard of quality, involving a full production team selected from the finest 1/6 companies in the world. Before John brings this war to a tiny little town, let me go ahead and thank first the folks over at Sly Stallone Shop that did provide this sample, the First Blood John J. Rambo, that we can have a look at this review. I'll provide the link down below in the video description, though some sad news. This guy is a pre-order over on their website. Unfortunately, he has those since sold out. The price of which this figure was going for was $260. If you are, though, disappointed, you can also mark yourself over at the Notify When Available option. It's just neighboring to when you can actually select to buy this guy. Put in your email, and they'll notify you when this guy gets stocked again. That being said, let's go ahead. Right to the very top of the head I go. John J. Rambo from First Blood stands actually exactly 12 inches in height. I want to make sure the 0 is all the way down at the bottom here. But yeah, he's about 12 inches exactly in height. That translates, though, to a figure that's 30 centimeters tall. One thing I did want to draw your attention to is that included with John Rambo, you get yourself a smaller index card place card that really does take the place of the larger size box. If you are one that doesn't really have the room to display your figure along with the box that he comes inside of, this smaller place card does a rather nice job of recreating that same image. The artwork is really too good to be bearing away the box. At least it's nicely handled here in a smaller card, but it serves also a secondary purpose as well, giving proper recognition to all the talented artists and people responsible for producing the John Rambo. Right at the very top of the list, Sylvester Stallone himself, who served as a supervisor and direction. Down below that, again, all the talented artists, executive producer and direction, Nick Cadasco from Sly Stallone Shop itself, artist direction and production management, Fabio Veresi, 3D head sculpt by Inigo Gil, 3D accessories design by Sean Dabbs, master paint Dario Barbera, and box artwork by John Rivoli. Some of those names, if you are in the world of collecting 6-scale figures, may recognize those individuals right away, like Sean Dabbs, for example. But I do like the idea that they actually included this card. Likely, I will be displaying this along with the figure. I might even find myself a little standee, for example. I can actually prop that up. But to move that aside for at least for right now, let's move on to at least the display stand that comes included with John Rambo. You get yourself sort of the pavement in which the character's walking across. Partially a manhole cover you can see here from the side. I do really like the way they finished this from all the sides, so nothing really feels left off when it came to the sculpting process. There's nothing really to indicate the name of the movie, but I mean, of course, you're looking at the character right away and would recognize right away what movie he's from. But I do really like the way they've added the surface texturing here. The coloring in which they've also chose this dark asphalt gray works quite well with the sculpting that they've provided here. Again, it's finished from all the sides. Nothing, again, feels left and barren. The bottom, however, though, only has just the 4 felt feet in the corners provided to prevent scratching on any surface. Running through the figure's accessories, to be fair, he doesn't come with much. Although, depicted from where this scene takes place, John really isn't carrying a lot of his belongings with him anyways. The first of which, I suppose the largest of which, the figure comes included with his military sleeping bag. The bag, I would say, it's safe to say, has been quite weathered. You can see all the stains it's picked up in all of his travels that he's had. It looks, for all intensive purposes, like you would be able to un-Velcro this, and technically you can. Essentially, you'd just be un-Velcroing this, and you could take the entire pack out, rolling out the sleeping bag. The bag itself actually does have a zipper So you can unzip it, only by just a little bit though. And John Rambo, for all intents and purposes, would be able to crawl inside of it. It's a fairly cushioned sleeping bag also as well. And if to look at it, I mean, to take all the details into account, the sleeping bag really is the same size as the figure. So again, for all intents and purposes, you really would be able to put the character inside. The interesting thing about it, though, is that all the stains and all the things that have settled onto the surface of the bag really have been on the bottom of the sleeping bag, not to the top. Again, it's those attentions to detail that I find is absolutely crazy about this figure. I'm going to put this now to the side, and again, looking through the rest of the figure's accessories, the more uninteresting aspect of things, the figure comes included with swappable pegs. Now, currently he has, of course, pegs on either forearm, but if you happen to lose any of them, or some stubborn ones stay behind with the existing hands, then you've got a couple of extra pegs to work with. Put those to the side. The figure also comes included with his dog tags, and you want to talk attention to detail. I'm just going to get this as close as I possibly can. You can, if you can actually see it, make out, I want to make sure I've got it facing the right way here, you can actually make out that not only his name is on there, I'm seeing if I can, there we go, maybe you'll be able to see it by now. Not only is his name there, but his ID number has been printed onto the plastic as well. Now again, you want to look at the sizing of this, just by my having it in my hands alone. The idea that they'd actually be able to put that in there as a detail, something that is legible, providing you have it close enough to your eye, or if your eyes aren't clear enough to be able to see it, close enough at least to a camera that you can make out the actual individual digits that make up his ID number. Crazy detail. This, by the way, there's a tiny little clasp right here. I don't know if I would necessarily want to detach this, because I would think there's more of a risk that I wouldn't be able to close it back together. But I probably would be able to just simply take John Rambo's head off, fit this over top of his neck, and then simply just pop the head back in place. I'll leave it off, at least for now, the time being. The figure also comes included with his knife. The knife, I gotta say, is nicely replicated from the original knife that he would have had in the movie. I believe the original knives were the Jimmy Lyle designed survival knives, matching the same green hilt or handle as he would have actually technically had for his jacket. Now, there is a hole on the bottom. The only reasoning for that is the bottom section of this knife can actually be removed. It did take a lot of time, I have to admit, to try to turn this and remove it off. Instead of actually turning it, I found the easier thing to do was kind of rock it back and forth as I was pulling it out. Eventually, it freed itself, and normally this would have been the place where I'd be able to show you the compass. Now, there is, I don't know if you can actually see, a tiny little silver disc on the inside of it. I think the top of my compass was actually still rooted inside the knife. Normally, though, the print would be on the end of this, as it would be certainly a serviceable compass. But unfortunately, it wasn't on this knife, not the one that was provided to me. This just then pops back into place. You want to make sure, of course, I don't want to jinx myself by saying this, that you don't lose the end of it, because, of course, the knife will look unfinished. The blade itself, handled very well in a nice silver color. Fairly pointy as well, nothing of which to draw blood to it, but it's a very nicely painted looking knife. It can be holstered in John's side. If you just pull back his jacket just a little bit, may even involve me bringing his arm up just a little bit as well. He has what looks to be a real leather holster, to which the knife can actually slide into the holster. You just want to be careful, of course, that it doesn't snag on, as the jacket, as you can already see, has a couple of little strings and threads attached to it, but the knife does holster into the side of the leg. And I gotta even say as well, the stitch work is handled extremely well for the holster. It looks like a full 1-to-1 scale holster, simply just shrunk down. Because, of course, I'm going to be looking at the jacket and eventually getting to the figure's articulation, you'll excuse me if I don't actually holster the knife completely. I'm just going to put that, though, to the side. The last thing I did want to draw your attention to is, of course, all the included hands that also come included with Rambo here, too. Currently, right now, in the sockets of his forearms, probably the least interesting, he comes included with closed fists. I guess not necessarily least interesting if he's going to be, of course, brawling with the local sheriff and all the lawmen that work in that town. Maybe closed fists would be a better idea. But, though, if you did want to display the figure as slightly something different, like, for example, hands at least to hold the knife, he does come included with hands. Several hands. You may also be able to see, as we look at least of this hand, that each of the hands and each of the fingernails on those fingers have been all individually painted. You can see the cuticle, the very end of the nails, is slightly different color than the nails themselves. Maybe you'll even be able to see it a little bit better by bringing up these relaxed hands so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. See how the actual individual cuticles and the ends of the fingers have all been painted? I can't believe that they'd actually even take the time to do that. There is a little bit of off red coloring added to the knuckles, so it looks like there's a little bit of bruising or red that's come to the surface of the skin. But again, like, the attention to detail on these is absolutely incredible. The plastic, as a side note, seems generally quite soft. It's not really going to be causing much of a problem when it comes to certainly holding the knife. Like, for example, if you want to take the knife and fit it into his hand, quite easy to hold, quite difficult to fall out. Now, what you can also do, too, is that you can use these hands to hold on to the strap that I'm now going to have to wrap back up around the sleeping bag. And you can actually hold the strap. The figure seems to also possess double hinges on the elbows, so he can actually hold the strap as he's walking and leaving town, at least to the hope of the sheriff. So he does come with those. The thing he also does come included with is trigger firing hands. And though the figure doesn't actually come included with any weapons to wield other than just the knife, it looks like he actually had at one point planned maybe holding a gun. Or maybe down the road, if we eventually get ourselves another Rambo, as I think the plan is made there by Sylvester Stallone, these hands, I'm sure, will come in handy at that point, that you can then use them for guns instead. Again, like, just a crazy amount of detail. I can't believe again, like, they put the cuticles and they painted the ends of the nails. Attention to detail is incredible on this figure. Then on to actually the figure itself. And again, not that the design is limited, because of course this is the way that John looks at the beginning of Rambo First Blood. He is really nicely replicated here in the way that they've done the costuming. And though maybe it does look simple from the eye, it's incredible to imagine all the attention to detail that they actually put to the jacket itself. Like, for example, he's got this Vietnam era field jacket. The jacket itself, first of all, like, the material is handled really well. It's thick, it's durable. It certainly feels like it's going to withstand the test of time. You can also see as well, it says U.S. Army right at the very top, and he also has, very often discolored, he's got the little American flag also stitched onto his jacket. It doesn't look like it's necessarily stitched. It's probably been glued onto the jacket itself. The jacket looks off-colored, it looks discolored, it looks like it's had some wear and tear, but it also does look like, in a way, that it looks like it's wet. Especially when you look at it from the back, it looks like it's got some little off-colorings here, where it looks like maybe the jacket has been in a rainfall, like John's been walking through the rain. The jacket's really nicely done here. Now, the jacket, in the movie, a lot of times, while Rambo's walking, he usually brings his collar up. Now, you can also do this with this jacket. And one little bit of detail that you overlook when the jacket is actually folded down is that there is an actual zipper on the underside of the collar. Again, for me, when it comes to displaying the figure, I'm going to have the collar, I think, more so up. I like the idea that they didn't actually permanently stitch the collar into the rest of the jacket. Sometimes that does happen with jacketed characters. They simply just stitch the collar piece down, not assuming that anyone as a collector is going to want to have the collar up, but they did take that to account when it came to actually displaying the figure like that. I like the little zipper there on the back there as well. For all intents and purposes, you can actually unzip the jacket, revealing underneath not only the red shirt that he wears, which again does have a little bit of off coloring, like it looks maybe like dried sweat, for example, or even just the rainfall or dirt or whatever else he's picking up along the ways. But also what you're getting here underneath is what seems to be a brand new body mold, something that we haven't seen before. I think Stallone, in fact, even talked about the idea that he wanted his bodies for his figures to have unique traits to them, something you wouldn't recognize and pick up right away with other figures. Like, it feels, first of all, like a very thick, muscular body. There's no additional padding. All you're seeing right now, and all I'm feeling right now, is plastic molded body. But again, like, very muscular. You can even see like little intentions to detail, like, for example, on the sides there of his pectoral muscles, and even like the abdomen area, which would be a little harder for me to get access to. Let's just open up the jacket a little bit. The abdomen, let me just bring this up so you can see really what's going on here. Like, again, for how much they've put into this, there's even veins actually on abdomens. I never even thought you could get veins on abdomens. Sly Stallone finds the way. And again, this also gives me the chance to show you guys the additional articulation that they managed to put into this figure. For me, I would still likely be buttoning up or zipping up the jacket, but the idea that you'd be able to open up like this and see exactly what's going on here, they spared no expense when it came to the sculpting of this figure. He does have actually serviceable pockets, and one thing he actually does have as well is that he has pockets where you can actually put his hands inside the pockets if he's wanted to stay warm like he does in the movie. As we certainly do have the jacket open right now, you can kind of see the way they've done a real or faux leather belt, at least. His jeans have a lot, again, scuff and dirt and whatever else he's picked up along the ways. The legs are just as muscular as is the torso. Like again, it just feels like they probably have used a unique and dedicated body solely for this figure that we wouldn't have normally just seen as a defaulted stock 6-scale figure. Usually what we might end up getting with other companies that do 6-scale lines. If I was to be able to bring up the sleeve, which would be a little harder to do here on his jacket, again, like all of this feels muscular from neck all the way down to the bottoms of his legs. There's not really one place that feels like it's been left off of being sculpted in muscle. Again, when we get to the detailing, one other thing I did want to draw your attention to is the way they've actually done his boots. Now, the boots themselves, normally what you'd expect to see is that the boots themselves would all just be plastic. Plastic from this part all the way down, and always that does limit the articulation when it comes to the figure's ankles. These boots, on the other hand, actually look like they've been used with real or faux leather. The leather itself, one thing I do worry about, though, when it comes to the actual leather, is I worry that this may start to split if you start to move the ankles too much over time. The laces are a bit on the more longer side, but I'm sure you could probably even just trim this out. Dean Knight, for example, did in fact a hack in which he actually just shortened out the laces. I believe he added a little bit of glue there just to ensure that the laces weren't going to come loose. The laces, I feel, are a little on the more longer side, but still, like, the boots are really well handled. I know, of course, all this time we've been looking through Sly Stallone. The really last thing should have really been the first thing that we looked at, and that was actually the head sculpt itself. It's nothing really I would have changed other than maybe perhaps one thing. The heads themselves are all hand-painted, and there's no denying the fact that this looks clearly like John J. Rambo and Sylvester Stallone at the time in which the movie was made. The hair itself is actually not rooted hair, so it's plastic. I think it actually works better that they use the plastic head sculpt rather than actually rooting the hair. Rooted hair can always be tricky at times if it is not handled well. I think using by plastic hair is the better route that they would have gone. He has, again, a little bit of stubble there on his face. The eyes themselves have a lot of life and personality going for him. Here's the one thing I would have probably done a little bit different. While I do like the skin tone, I think in the movie, John Rambo actually has a slight tan. He's got a little more of a reddish coloring to his skin. This is more what I would consider traditionally what Sylvester Stallone would look like if he doesn't have a tan. But I think in the actual Rambo movie, First Blood, he's notably showing a little more red in the skin tone. Other than that, there's nothing else I would have changed to the face. The face, I feel, is perfect. And again, like, there's a lot of life. There's a lot of stuff going on here with the eyes. You can really see the angst and the emotion behind John Rambo's eyes. For the articulation on this guy, again, we're going to start with the head, even though that was really technical, the last thing we looked at. The head is on a ball joint. So right away, you can rotate the head all the way around. You have the head looking down. About there. Actually, you get a lot more than what you'd expect there to be, especially with how much hair that he actually has on his head. But the head can actually look really low and luminous down, or you can actually have the head looking up as well. You can rock the head back and forth also as well. Now, it does also seem like there's a little gap right here, so I have to wonder there's a secondary ball joint not working behind the scenes at the neck portion itself. As we've already kind of opened up his jacket and revealed what he looks like underneath, you can also know as well that he does have the upper torso ball joint. It looks as well like the figure has a secondary ball joint at the base of the abdomen. As for the arms themselves, normally if you have a figure that's inside of a jacket, for example, the thickness of the material, not to mention how tight it may be on the figure's body, sometimes does render the figure's articulation null and void. But because he also has a military jacket that's fairly baggy to start off with, the material also is, while durable, does feel a little more thinner, so it's a little easier, I think, to rotate the arms back and forth. Figure does have a bicep swivel. The figure seems to have a double hinge on the elbow, and the hands rotate all the way around. As for the legs themselves, they do split out. The only thing you will want to be careful of is when splitting out the legs, is that the holster is attached by this string that wraps around about mid-thigh. It is currently tied, but as you're moving it out and about like this, it could actually technically come loose. It would only involve, if anything, you go to back and tie that back up again. He has a little rotation at the top of the thigh. The figure seems to also possess a double hinge on the knee. And because, again, they're using an actual leather or faux leather material, you can actually quite easily move his feet up and down this way and also ankle rock them as well. Short of actually just zipping back up John Rambo's jacket, he's a great looking figure. Not traditionally, I think, what most people would think right away when you hear John Rambo, the first thing I usually tend to think of is First Blood Part 2, where John Rambo's wearing the now classic red headband. I'm sure at some point we are going to be getting that figure, but I'm kind of glad to also see as well that when it came to Sly Stallone's shop putting out 6-scale figures and starting their way first with First Blood, that they sort of give us John Rambo as he first appears in the film. And then, of course, all the subsequent 6-scale figures we'll eventually get from that company will, again, follow the exploits not only of John Rambo, but also Sylvester Stallone and all the various movies he would appear in afterwards. I'm really happy with how John Rambo turned out. I think Sly Stallone's shop has done an incredible job of recreating the way that Sly Stallone looks like in that classic film, shrunk down in size to a 6-scale format. Speaking of 6 scales, the company is also, this is the first figure that they've done, but they've already got a pre-order also over on their website for Cobra. Cobra's a personal soft spot for me. I remember watching that late at night growing up as a kid. And speaking of also growing up as a kid, I didn't actually watch First Blood until I was later on in my teens. For me, growing up, John Rambo was always the one that was carrying around the rocket launcher, shirtless, and of course he had that classic bandana around his head. Even though this isn't what I traditionally would think of for John Rambo, I do think it's smart on the company's part that they decided to do this guy first. This is the first way we see John Rambo in the franchise that will eventually follow after the first film, so I think it's only more fitting that the company decides to release him looking like this first, before branching out to the way he looks later on in the movie, and then also into the subsequent Rambo films that would happen afterwards. Now again, the sad news though is that this guy was on sale, well, was for sale at $260 over on their website. Not that that's the sad news, because I definitely think the figure's worth the price that they're asking. The sad part though is he's sold out. And can you really blame why the figure would have been sold out in the first place? The good news, at least in all of this, is that you can also go over to their website and you can select the notify when available. So even though it's sold out right now, at some point you got to believe that they're going to be stocking the figure again, and then you'll get that friendly reminder via email that John Rambo from First Blood is now showed up in their inventory again. I did actually manage to also get his dog tag over his neck. It was actually quite easy to remove the head. When you remove the head, what you're actually getting underneath is not just the ball joint alone, but you're getting the ball joint and sort of that tin can shaped head. Or it's kind of like a socket joint, and then the head simply sits on top of that cylindrical shape. So it's very easy, in fact, to remove the head, slide down the dog tags, and then just put the head over top of it. I've left the jacket open for right now, but I'm sure I'm going to be zipping it up at some point. The problem with a smaller zipper, after all, is it's fine and good to unzip a jacket. It's going to take me a little longer to zip the jacket back up. But leave it with me. Leave it with me. I'm going to do it. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at Sly Stallone's shop that did provide the sample of John J. Rambo from First Blood that we could have a look at in this review. Let me know what you guys think of the figure down below. Is this a figure you'd like to add to your collection? And also, as a question to throw that out to you guys, the viewing audience, what's your favorite Rambo film? Even though for me, growing up, it was First Blood Part 2. But as a teen, I grow to love a little more First Blood. There's always something about the idea of John Rambo leaving traps for the police that I always found, as an adult, to be a little bit more interesting. Again, I'm really glad that they decided to approach First Blood first before, again, doing the rest of the Rambo films. But let me know what your favorite Rambo movie is down below in the comments section. And as well, if you enjoyed this video, hit with a like. If you're loving the content you guys are seeing and do want to certainly stick around for more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and move your way on over to, I don't suspect that's a trap, it could very well be. But tread cautiously over to that bell notification and make sure you turn that on so you're going to get reminders every single time a new video posts. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.